The photograph trembles in her hands. One photograph. That is all that remains. Cassandra Wells stands in the ruins of what used to be her rented room, ash coating her skin like a second grave, holding the only image she has left of her late husband's face. The fire came at midnight. It came without warning. It came without mercy. The rest is gone, her clothes, her books, the small wooden box where she kept the $200 she had saved across 8 months of double shifts and skipped meals. $200. That is all she has left in the world. $200 and a photograph of a man she lost 4 years ago, a man whose name no one in this city knows, a man she loved with the kind of love that survives even death. But what changes everything is the child. The child who is not supposed to be hers. The child who calls her name from 3 blocks away, running through the humid August darkness with tears streaming down his face because someone told him that she was gone. Micah. 7 years old. Dark hair matted with sweat. Eyes the color of winter rain. He arrives at the shelter every afternoon after school, sits in the corner with his notebook and his colored pencils, and draws pictures of families that look nothing like the broken pieces of his own life. She has been teaching him to read for the past 3 months. She has been braiding his hair on Friday afternoons. She has been the only person in his world who looked at him and saw not a child to be pitied but a child to be loved. What she does not know is that Micah Vitoli is the missing son of the most dangerous man in New York. His father. The man who controls half the city's underworld with the kind of absolute authority that makes governors and judges look over their shoulders. The man who has spent the last 7 years searching every corner of this city, following every lead, burning through millions of dollars, all because his brother betrayed him and his son disappeared into the chaos of that betrayal like smoke. The man named Nico Vitoli. The humidity hangs over Manhattan like a curse. Thick. Suffocating. The kind of heat that makes the asphalt sweat and the sky turn the color of a bruise. It is August 14th at 11:13 in the evening. In a restaurant called Torelli's, 3 blocks from where Cassandra stands covered in ash, Nico Vitoli sits at his regular table in the back booth, the one with the view of the kitchen and the exits, the one where no one can approach him without being seen. The candlelight catches the scar that runs from his left eye to his jawline, a mark earned 15 years ago when his own brother drew a gun and fired. That brother is dead now. That brother paid the price. But the wound remains. The wound always remains. Carlo enters the booth without knocking. Carlo never knocks. Carlo has worked for Nico for 19 years, since they were both young men learning how to survive in a world that respects only power and vengeance. He sits without being invited. This is the privilege of men who have spilled blood together. The shelter, Carlo says. His voice is rough, worn out from years of giving orders. The shelter in Red Hook. We found something. Nico does not move. He does not ask. He waits. This is how power works. This is how a man maintains control over everyone around him, by making them understand that his silence is more dangerous than any question he could ask. A teacher, Carlo continues. She's been working with Micah for 3 months. No one knew. The shelter director didn't even know her full name. She works as a nanny for the Mercer family during the day, teaches at the shelter at night. She pours all her money into that place. All of it. Lives in a converted closet in their mansion. Sleeps on a cot. Eats what the cook throws away. For the first time in the conversation, Nico picks up his glass of wine. The glass costs more than Cassandra earns in a month. The wine inside costs more than the entire contents of her apartment once did. And Micah knows her, Nico says. Not a question. A statement of fact. He asks for her, Carlo says. Every single day. When we picked him up from school today, the first words out of his mouth were her name. Cassandra. He says she's his favorite person. He says she listens when he talks. He says she remembers the things he draws and asks him about them the next day. Nico closes his eyes. For 15 years he has been searching for his son. For 15 years he has hired investigators, paid off officials, followed leads that turned into dead ends. And now he discovers that his son has found a teacher. A nanny. A woman who pours her wages into children who are not hers. A woman who lives in poverty while teaching a child to value the small, precious things in life. A woman who has no idea that the boy she loves is the son of the man who controls half of New York's underworld. Find out everything, Nico says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath, like something carved from stone. Everything about her. The kitchen door swings open. Nino appears, his face flushed red, his hands trembling slightly. Nino is the youngest of Nico's men, only 28 years old, but he has the kind of instincts that usually take a lifetime to develop. He crosses the restaurant without looking at the other tables, without acknowledging the waiters, without any sense of the caution that usually guides his movements. There's been a fire, Nino says. Red Hook. An apartment building. The shelter director called emergency services. She's saying one of their volunteers didn't show up for the evening program. She's saying they think she was in the building when it went up. They're saying she might be dead. The wine glass sets down. The sound of it against the marble table is like a shot in the silence. Nico stands. He does not stand quickly. He stands the way a general stands when the battle has shifted. He stands the way a man stands when he has just realized that the thing he was searching for has been standing 3 blocks away this entire time. Get the car, Nico says to Carlo. Every man we have. Now. The humid August night tears open with distant thunder. The kind of thunder that promises rain but never delivers, that hangs in the air like a warning. Nico Vitoli, the man who has killed enemies with his bare hands, the man who has ordered the destruction of rival operations without flinching, the man who built his empire on the principle that sentiment is weakness, moves through the darkness toward a fire he has no right to enter, toward a woman he has never met, toward a moment that will either shatter him completely or rebuild him into something he thought was lost forever. Before we go any further into what happens next, if this story is hitting you right in the heart, please drop a like on this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. We promise you, the next part of this story will shock you in ways you won't expect. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us understand how Cassandra Wells became the woman standing in the ashes holding only a photograph and $200. 3 weeks earlier. The Mercer mansion sits on the Upper East Side like a crown on a queen's head. Limestone facade. Black iron gates. 7 stories of old money and older cruelty. Cassandra has lived here for 3 years. 3 years in a converted closet that used to store cleaning supplies, a room so small that when she lies on her cot she can touch both walls if she stretches out her arms. 3 years of waking at 4:19 in the morning to prepare breakfast for children who treat her like furniture. 3 years of scrubbing their stains from the carpet, of reading bedtime stories in a voice that pretends not to be exhausted, of pouring her paychecks into a cause that everyone she knows thinks is insane. The shelter is called House of Hope. It sits in Red Hook across from an abandoned warehouse, in a neighborhood where the police rarely come and the news cameras never venture. Cassandra found it 2 years ago on a Tuesday evening. A small building. Brown brick. Windows covered with bars. Inside, 12 children sleep on donated cots, eat meals prepared on a budget so tight it requires mathematics. She began volunteering there because the children at the Mercer house had everything and felt nothing, and she needed to remember what it meant to matter to someone. On the morning when everything begins to change, Catherine Mercer calls Cassandra into the library. Catherine is 53 years old, dressed in a Chanel suit that costs more than Cassandra's annual salary, her blonde hair arranged into the kind of perfection that requires 3 hours at a salon every week. She sits behind a mahogany desk that belonged to her grandmother, a desk that has watched marriages dissolve and fortunes crumble, and nothing surprised Catherine Mercer in the slightest. The Vassar benefit is next month, Catherine says. She does not look at Cassandra. She looks at her laptop screen, at the social calendar of Manhattan's wealthiest families, at a world that exists in a separate dimension from the one where Cassandra lives. I will need you to work the evening. The The children will need dinner prepared, their clothes laid out. Your shift will be 16 hours. You will work it without complaint. Of course, Mrs. Mercer, Cassandra says. Her voice is quiet, practiced, the voice of someone who has learned to disappear inside her own words. She is standing beside the desk, her hands folded in front of her, her posture the perfect replica of a servant who accepts her place in the world. And Cassandra, Catherine adds, finally looking up from her screen. Her eyes are the color of ice, the kind of ice that forms on ponds where people drown. The nanny you will be replacing, the one who left last spring, she stole from me. I want you to understand that I am aware of the tendency in people of your background to think they're entitled to things that do not belong to them. I am aware of your I volunteer work in Red Hook. I want you to know that I am watching. The words land like stones in still water. Cassandra nods. She leaves the library. She returns to her converted closet, sits on her cot, and counts the money in her wallet. $43.17. This is what she has to last until Friday, when her next paycheck will arrive. This is what stands between her and hunger. But 3 blocks away, in the neighborhood where the police rarely come and the news cameras never venture, a 7-year-old boy named Micah is sitting on the floor of the shelter with his colored pencils spread out in front of him like precious jewels. He is drawing a picture. The picture shows a woman with dark hair sitting beside a child, reading from a book. The woman in his drawing is smiling. This matters because Micah does not remember what smiling looks like. This matters because the last time someone smiled at him, his world fell apart. This matters because in his drawing, the woman's name is written in large careful letters at the top of the page, Cassandra. The shelter sits on the corner of Fulton and Van Brunt in Red Hook, a converted warehouse that Cassandra rents for $340 a month, money she does not have, money she borrows against the promise of next week's tips, money that somehow always arrives just as the landlord's patience wears thin. The building smells like old wood and children's hope, a mixture of paint thinner and crackers and the particular sweetness of innocence. She arrives each evening after her shift at the Mercer house ends, after she has cleared the dinner plates and loaded the dishwasher and folded the napkins into precise triangles, her feet aching inside shoes held together with clear tape and prayer. Tonight, the August heat clings to everything. The humidity is thick enough that she can taste it on her tongue, like swallowing cotton soaked in warm salt water. She carries a plastic bag containing 6 peanut butter sandwiches she assembled in the Mercer's kitchen, slipping bread and jars into her oversized work bag while Catherine was occupied with her evening phone calls. Cassandra learned long ago that feeding children is not stealing. It is survival. The room is small, 12 by 14 feet, and currently houses for children. Micah sits alone near the window, his colored pencils arranged in careful rows in front of him, each one sharpened to a perfect point. He is 7 years old. He has been coming to the shelter for 8 months, since the night he appeared at the door with a police officer and a social worker, his eyes the color of storm clouds and his entire body trembling like something that has been hunted. Micah, Cassandra says, kneeling beside him. Did you eat lunch today? He does not answer. He rarely speaks. His pencils are blue and red and yellow, and he is drawing again, the same drawing he always draws. A woman with dark hair reading to a child. Always the same woman. Always smiling. Cassandra offers him a sandwich wrapped in foil. He takes it wordlessly and sets it on the floor beside him without eating. This is their ritual. She provides. He refuses. But she provides anyway because refusing to try would require her to accept that he will not eat, and she cannot accept that. What are you drawing? She asks. Micah points to the woman's face with his pencil. The tip leaves a mark of blue against the paper. You, he says. His voice is so soft she has to lean closer to hear it. Reading to me. The words land in her chest like small stones dropped into still water. She has read to Micah exactly 4 times. For afternoons when she stayed late past her shift, sitting beside him while he pressed his small body against her side, and she opened picture books and spoke the words while his breathing slowly deepened into something approaching peace. "That is a beautiful drawing," she says. She means it with the whole weight of her exhaustion and her hunger and her desperate, fractured hope. Micah looks at her with eyes that have seen things no 7-year-old should see. "Will you leave like the others?" The question stops her breath. She reaches for his hand. His fingers are small and warm and they grip hers with a strength that seems impossible in a child so thin. "I am not going anywhere," she says. The words are a promise she cannot afford to break, which means they are already dangerous. At that same hour, in a glass and steel building 37 blocks away, Nico Vitoli sits at the head of a conference table made of marble imported from Carrara, surrounded by 8 men in suits that cost more than Cassandra's monthly rent. They are discussing territory. They are discussing shipments. They are discussing a problem named Robert Hargrove, the spoiled nephew of Nico's betrayed brother, the man who sold the Vitoli family's secrets to the Castelliano organization in exchange for cash and power he will never actually receive. Robert is moving against the Brooklyn docks again, Carlo says. Carlo is Nico's oldest lieutenant, the man who has been at his side for 28 years, since before the grey began threading through his dark hair. He brought in muscle from outside. Russians. They are not respecting the boundaries. Nico does not move. His hands rest flat on the marble, palms down, and they do not shake. His face is a surface of stone, beautiful and immovable. The scar that runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a gift from his brother during a conversation 15 years ago about what happens to family who betray family, catches the fluorescent light. "Find him," Nico says. His voice is neither loud nor soft. It is a door closing. Find everything he touches. Find what he loves. And then bring it to me so he understands what it feels like to lose something irreplaceable. The men exchange glances. This is not the first time they have heard Nico give an order like this, but it never becomes routine. There is something final in his tone, something that suggests that Robert Hargrove's remaining life can now be measured in hours rather than years. Nino, the younger lieutenant, leans forward. "And if he runs?" Nico's eyes move to Nino with a deliberation that makes the younger man's breath catch. "He will run. Men like Robert always run. But there is nowhere in New York he can hide that we will not find him. And when we do, he will wish he had stood and fought instead." The meeting ends. The men file out, their footsteps echoing in the hallway like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. Nico remains at the table. He pulls out his phone and scrolls through photographs that his security team has provided, images of his brother's children, his brother's wife, his brother's business associates. Somewhere in this city is his own son. Somewhere in the crowd of millions is a child who carries his blood and does not know it. The boy disappeared 9 years ago from a shopping center in Manhattan. The case went cold. The police stopped looking. And Nico has spent nearly a decade learning to live with the weight of that absence the way one learns to live with a missing limb, by adapting, by moving through the world in a way that no longer includes reaching for something that is not there. He does not know that the child he has been searching for is sitting in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, drawing pictures of a woman who feeds him sandwiches she cannot afford to give, a woman who whispers that she will never leave even though her life is constructed on the assumption that everything she builds will eventually burn. Back at the shelter, Cassandra is counting money. She does this twice a day now, once in the morning before work and once in the evening when she returns. The ritual has become essential, a way of measuring survival. $83.40. This is what remains after she paid the landlord. This is what must last until the first of the month when the Mercer's direct deposit hits her account. 8 days. She will buy dried beans and rice and canned vegetables. She will fill the shelves here, and she will eat as little as possible at the Mercer house, though Catherine has made it clear that she expects her employees to be thin and invisible. There is a rent increase coming. The landlord mentioned it casually when she paid this month's portion. $375 starting in September. An increase she cannot accommodate with her salary of $2,000 a month, from which she must subtract the cost of living and the shelter and the endless, bottomless hunger of the children who depend on her. She sits on the folding chair in the corner and pulls a photograph from her pocket. The photo is old, the edges soft from handling. It shows a man with kind eyes and dark hair, his arm around a younger version of herself. His name was Daniel. He died 4 years ago. A car accident in the rain. A moment of inattention. A truck that did not see him. All the ways that ordinary life can shatter in an instant. She keeps this photograph not as a reminder of what she had but as proof that she was once loved. That at some point, she was worthy of someone's choice. That she was not always just a pair of hands washing other people's dishes. Micah is sleeping now, his head resting on a donated pillow, the sandwich still uneaten beside him. The other children are arranged on cots in the darkness, 3 girls ranging from age 5 to 9, all of them waiting for a system that has already failed them to eventually remember they exist. Cassandra covers them with blankets from the thrift store. She checks the locks on the doors. She counts the money in the donation jar, finding exactly $12.63, which means that next week, if a family member contributes, if someone believes this shelter is worth supporting, they might be able to buy milk. She locks the front door behind her at 11:14 p.m. The street is empty. The August heat has not diminished with the coming of night. It hangs over Brooklyn like something living and hungry. Her phone buzzes. A text from Catherine Mercer, "The house key you left on the kitchen counter is missing. I assume you took it. I will be reducing your pay by $40 to replace it. Consider it a lesson about accountability." Cassandra did not take a key. But she has learned that arguing with Catherine is a luxury she cannot afford. She simply nods to the empty street and continues walking toward the small apartment she rents in Bay Ridge, a space so narrow that when she lies on her mattress, she can touch both walls if she stretches her arms. She has $83.40. She has 4 years of lost love living in a photograph. She has 7 children who depend on her and cannot advocate for themselves. She has a converted closet in a mansion where she sleeps for hours a night. She has nothing else. And 3 blocks away, in a restaurant called Civetta where the waiters wear black ties and the wine list is longer than a small book, Nico Vitoli is being served veal prepared in a sauce that costs more to create than Cassandra's annual salary. He is alone at his private table. He is thinking about vengeance. He is thinking about a brother who chose greed over family. He is thinking about a child whose name he never learned to pronounce correctly because no one has ever told him the child's name. He does not know that in exactly 46 days, his entire understanding of family and loyalty and the meaning of home will shift like an earthquake. The veal arrives at Nico Vitoli's private table at 11:17 p.m. He does not taste it. He cuts it into smaller and smaller pieces with mechanical precision, the knife against the plate producing a sound like a metronome marking time he will never get back. At 6'2" with shoulders broad enough to block out light, Nico commands the restaurant without speaking. His suit costs $4,000. The gold watch on his wrist costs more than Cassandra's entire year of wages. His men, Carlo and Nino, stand at the perimeter of the dining room like sentries guarding something sacred and terrible all at once. Nico Vitoli has built an empire from nothing but rage and a code he learned from his father before his father was shot dead in a grocery store parking lot over a card game debt that was never his. He was 14 years old. His father fell against the car and bled into the snow, and Nico swore to himself that he would never be powerless again. He would never watch someone he loved collapse while he stood helpless. 31 years have passed since that afternoon in December. He has kept that promise to himself through violence, through strategy, through sacrifices that carved pieces out of his soul he will never recover. 3 years ago, his brother Francesco made a choice. Francesco chose money over loyalty. He sold information to the Russo family, enemies who had hunted Nico since before the brother was even born. Nico had given Francesco everything. A position in the organization. Respect. Protection that extended to every person Francesco loved. But greed tastes sweeter than gratitude to some men, and Francesco could not resist its pull. When Nico learned the truth, he did not kill his brother. This fact alone tells you something about the depth of Nico's code. Instead, he exiled him. He sent him to a small town in upstate New York with $300,000 and a condition: never contact the family again. Never return to New York. Never acknowledge that the Vitoli name had ever belonged to him. Francesco agreed. He disappeared like smoke. But Francesco had a son. A boy named Micah who was 7 years old when his father vanished. Francesco's wife told the child that his father died. She did not explain that his death was a kind of spiritual execution, a removal from existence that would haunt Francesco for the rest of his life. Micah grew up with a photograph of a father he barely remembered and questions no one would answer. 2 years ago, Micah ran away from his mother in upstate New York. He was on the streets for 6 months before a woman found him sleeping in a shelter. Nico does not know his nephew's name is being pronounced correctly in the mouth of a nanny who has devoted every waking hour to children who are not hers. Nico does not know that the boy he has been searching for, the child he promised himself he would find and protect and restore to the family, has been living 30 miles away in Brooklyn the entire time. He does not know that Micah draws pictures with Cassandra Wells at 3 in the morning when he cannot sleep. He does not know that Micah calls her Vivi and that when he is sad, he asks her to draw colors for sad days. He does not know that tonight will be the last night he spends alone with his rage. He does not know that in exactly 46 minutes, his world will crack open. The doors of Civetta burst inward at 11:58 p.m. A man in a charcoal suit enters. Robert Hargrove. Age 42. Nephew of the brother Nico exiled 3 years ago. Robert has the soft face of someone who has never worked for anything, the entitled posture of a man who believes the world owes him a kingdom because his father whispered it to him as a bedtime story. He approaches Nico's table with a smile that does not reach his eyes. "Uncle," Robert says. The word tastes like poison in his mouth. "We need to talk about your future." Nico does not look up from his plate. "You are not my nephew." "I do not have a nephew." "But I do have information," Robert says. He sits uninvited at Nico's table. Carlo steps forward. Nico raises one hand. A single gesture. Carlo stops. "A girl. Works at a shelter in Brooklyn. She has something that belongs to you. Or rather, she has someone. A boy. 7 years old. Does that interest you?" For the first time, Nico looks at Robert directly. His eyes are storm gray and absolutely still. "Speak. I want a position in the organization. A real position. Not the scraps my uncle got. Real power. In exchange, I tell you where the boy is. I help you find him. And then we both profit from what comes next." Nico stands. He is a full head taller than Robert, and when Nico stands, Robert shrinks into himself like something evaporating. "You are Francesco's son," Nico says quietly. "Which means you are my blood. Which means I will not kill you for this insult. But you have 1 hour to leave New York. If you are still in this city when that hour passes, I will find you. And what I do to you will make your father's exile look like a mercy." Robert's face flushes red. "You will regret this. You will regret not taking my deal. Because I am going to find that girl and that boy, and I am going to use them to bring you down." Nico does not respond. He simply nods to Carlo, who escorts Robert out. But as Robert disappears into the August heat, something cold and dangerous stirs in Nico's chest. A boy. 7 years old. In Brooklyn. In a shelter. 30 miles away this entire time. He pulls out his phone. His voice, when he speaks, sounds like an engine turning over in the dark. "Find me a shelter in Brooklyn. Any shelter that works with abandoned children. And find me everyone connected to it. I want names, addresses, photographs, employment history. By midnight." Carlo takes the phone call in the car. Nino, who has been standing by the window, turns to his boss. "What did he tell you?" "My nephew," Nico says. "The one I lost 3 years ago. I think I know where he is. And I think the person protecting him is a woman who has poured everything she has into keeping him alive. The car moves through Brooklyn at midnight. The heat has not diminished. Thunder rumbles in the distance, a storm building that will break this city open before morning. Nico scrolls through the file that arrives on his phone. The Little Light Shelter. Founded 4 years ago. Director, unnamed woman, references anonymous. But one photograph is attached. A nanny. 28 years old. Name, Cassandra Wells. The photograph shows a woman with dark hair pulled back severely, tired eyes that look decades older than her face, calloused hands folded in her lap. She is standing next to a boy with Nico's brother's chin and his mother's eyes. The boy is smiling. The woman is not smiling. She is looking at the child like he is the entire reason the universe was created. Take me there, Nico says. At 1:13 a.m., a black SUV pulls up outside Cassandra's apartment building in Bay Ridge. She is standing outside, trembling. The apartment behind her is smoking. Flames have consumed everything she owned. Her mattress. Her 2 sets of work clothes. The photograph of her husband that she has carried with her for 5 years. All of it is ash now. She is holding $200 in cash and a borrowed jacket and nothing else. The car door opens. Nico Vitoli steps out into the August heat, and Cassandra looks up at the man standing before her. Tall. Expensive. Dangerous. A stranger. She does not recognize him. She does not know that her entire future has just pulled up to her burning apartment in a black SUV. What happened? Nico asks. His voice is steady, but something underneath it is fractured. Cassandra's voice comes out in pieces. Everything. I lost everything. The fire started at 11:45. I was at work. By the time they called me, there was nothing left to save. Nico looks at the building. Flames still flicker in the windows. He looks at Cassandra. Then he looks at Carlo, and something unspoken passes between them. Carlo nods and walks toward the fire truck to speak with the chief. What is your name? Nico asks. Cassandra Wells. Her teeth are chattering. Why are you here? How do you? I am Nico Vitoli. And I am here because someone sent me to find you. But I think I arrived for a different reason. Meanwhile, at the Manhattan offices of Catherine Mercer, something else is happening. Catherine sits in her penthouse at 1:30 a.m. in silk pajamas that cost more than Cassandra's monthly rent, scrolling through the employment applications from girls desperate enough to work for minimum wage. She smiles to herself. The fire was unexpected. But it is useful. Cassandra Wells has lost everything. She has nowhere to go. She has no one to turn to. And Catherine Mercer has made sure that every bank account and every reference has been locked down. By morning, the woman will be completely isolated. Catherine picks up her phone and calls her contact at the New York Times Society column. I have a story for you, she says. A nanny who stole from the Mercer family. Yes, jewelry. Yes, cash. And we have reason to believe she has been running a scam at a children's shelter in Brooklyn. Absolutely. Run it tomorrow morning. The lie is already spreading through networks Catherine has cultivated for 30 years. The rain came at 2 in the morning. Not the clean rain of spring, but the heavy, suffocating rain of a city drowning in its own heat. Cassandra stood in the ruins of what used to be her rented room on the 4th floor of a building that no longer existed. The walls were black. The floor was ash. Everything she owned fit into the memory of a suitcase that had burned away 7 hours ago. She held the photograph of her late husband between 2 fingers. It was the only thing the fire could not take. The edges were singed. His face was still there. Still smiling. Still believing she would be okay. $200 remained in her pocket. That was her entire life now. $200 and a photograph and the memory of a 7-year-old boy named Micah asking her that morning, "Will you be there tonight?" You always be there. She had not been there. The shelter had called her at the restaurant where she worked the late shift. There was a fire. Your belongings. We're so sorry. By the time she arrived, the building was a skeleton of charred wood and broken glass. Cassandra sank down onto a piece of rubble that used to be a dresser. The rain fell on her face and she did not wipe it away. Around her, the neighborhood slept. The city slept. Everything continued exactly as it had before, as if she had not just been erased from existence. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her stomach turned to stone. Ms. Wells, this is Sarah Chen from the New York Times Society column. We received information regarding your employment with the Mercer family. We would like to discuss allegations of theft. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. Cassandra stared at the words until they blurred. Then another message arrived. And another. A former co-worker. A friend. A woman from her church. All of them asking the same question in different ways. Is it true? Catherine Mercer's lie was spreading like a disease through networks of people who had never heard Cassandra's name until they heard it attached to words like thief and criminal and untrustworthy. By 3:30 in the morning, her bank account had been frozen. By 4, she had received an eviction notice from her landlord demanding 30 days' rent she could not pay. By 4:15, the shelter director had sent an email to all staff and volunteers. Effective immediately, Cassandra Wells is banned from the premises pending investigation into financial irregularities. She did not cry. Her tears had burned away with everything else. What stopped her from walking into the East River that night was a memory. Micah's voice, small and certain. I do not want Vivi to leave. That was what he called her. Vivi. Short for Vivienne, which was what her late husband used to call her. Micah had given her back a piece of her own name. She could not leave him wondering if she had abandoned him. She could not let Catherine Mercer define her story. Not yet. At exactly 4:42 in the morning, 3 black SUVs pulled up to an address in Midtown Manhattan. The building was old money. Steel and glass and windows that reflected nothing back. Robert Hargrove, nephew of Nico Vitoli's betrayed brother, was still awake. He was always awake when he was hunting something he thought he could take. He was packing cash into a duffel bag when the doors came off their hinges. 12 men in dark suits moved through the penthouse like smoke. They did not run. They did not shout. Each footstep was a measured promise. Carlo was first through the bedroom. Nino blocked the terrace. There was nowhere for Robert to go but down on his knees. Robert Hargrove, Carlo said, his voice steady as a heartbeat. You are under federal arrest for extortion, kidnapping conspiracy, and threatening the life of a protected witness. Robert's face went white. You can't, I didn't, my uncle will. Your uncle is exactly why you are going to prison, Carlo said. He produced a photograph. Cassandra's face. Her address. 3 pages of messages threatening to hurt her, to take Micah, to use her as leverage against Nico. All of it dated. All of it documented. All of it submitted to the FBI 7 hours ago. Robert began to scream. Then to beg. Then to cry. The transformation happened in seconds. The man who had convinced himself he was dangerous, untouchable, destined for power, collapsed into a trembling animal in borrowed pajamas as federal agents cuffed his wrists. Please, he gasped. Please, I was just. You were just a man who thought a woman with nothing to lose would accept his threats, Carlos said. You were wrong. By 5:15 in the morning, Robert Hargrove was being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs. The sunrise was just beginning to bleed across the horizon, and photographers were already there, cameras ready, catching every angle of his humiliation. The story would be everywhere by breakfast. But Catherine Mercer's downfall would take a different shape. Her destruction required more precision. The FBI raid on her penthouse happened at 6 in the morning. Agents arrived with a warrant for financial records, communication logs, and evidence of witness tampering and defamation. Catherine answered the door in a silk robe, her face still beautiful but suddenly brittle, like glass that had already been cracked and was just now realizing it was broken. "This is insane," she said. "I have done nothing wrong." "You filed a false police report," one agent said. "You froze the bank account of a private citizen without legal authority. You orchestrated a campaign of defamation with documented intent to harm. You conspired with media outlets to spread false allegations. This is federal crime." Catherine's attorney arrived within minutes. But attorneys cannot stop the recording. The agents documented everything. The malicious emails. The burner phone she used to call the Times. The spreadsheet where she had tracked Cassandra's movements and weaknesses like a hunter studying prey. By 7 in the morning, Cassandra's phone rang. It was Nico's voice, low and controlled. "It is done," he said. "Both of them. Robert is in federal custody. Catherine is being arrested as we speak. Everything she said about you was lies. Everything he threatened was documented. You are safe." Cassandra stood in the ruins of her room as the rain stopped and the sun began to burn away the clouds. She held the phone so tight her hand shook. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because," Nico said, "I have a son who calls you Vivi. And because a woman who pours her life into children who are not hers deserves more than to be invisible." Within 1 hour, the news networks broke the story. Robert Hargrove's mug shot was everywhere. Catherine Mercer's arrest footage played on every channel. By noon, 2 million people had watched the clips. By evening, every news outlet in the country had run the story. But what changed everything was what happened next. Nico arrived at the ruins where Cassandra still stood. He came alone, without guards, without fanfare. He looked at the ash and the broken things and then at her face, which had aged a lifetime in a single night. "Come home," he said. And Cassandra Wells, who had been nobody for so long, finally understood that she had never been invisible. She had only been waiting for someone to actually look. 1 year later, on an evening when the city turned amber and gold beneath the descending sun, Cassandra Wells stood in a classroom that smelled of new textbooks and possibility. 23 children sat at desks arranged in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on the woman who had become their teacher. She wore a cream-colored blouse, tailored and expensive but chosen for its simplicity, not its cost. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her hands, no longer calloused from scrubbing other people's houses, moved with quiet authority as she guided them through a lesson on poetry. She was no longer invisible. The House of Hope had expanded from a basement shelter into a full educational center occupying an entire brownstone in Brooklyn. The sign outside bore her name in letters of brushed steel, Cassandra Wells Memorial Learning Center. But it was not a memorial to her. It was a memorial to every child who had ever been told they were worthless, and a declaration that they were not. At 4:53 in the afternoon, as the children gathered their notebooks and filed toward the doors, a small hand slipped into hers. Micah was 7 now, tall for his age, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's, Cassandra's, gentle spirit. He wore a navy blazer over a white shirt, clothes that fit him perfectly because Nico insisted on nothing less, but the boy moved through the world with a humility that money could not purchase. "Vivi," he said, using the name he had called her since the beginning, "will you read to me tonight?" "Always," she said, and meant it with every cell of her being. The black SUV waited outside, idling with quiet purpose. Carlo sat in the driver's seat, his scarred face softened by the year that had passed. He opened the rear door for Cassandra and Micah, and as the car pulled into traffic, she watched the city move past the windows, the same city that had tried to break her, now transformed into something she was rebuilding, one child at a time. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse that overlooked Central Park, Nico Vitoli sat at a mahogany desk signing documents. Not contracts for weapons or territory. Documents that transferred his empire, the legitimate portions, the foundations of it, into the hands of accountants and lawyers who would run his restaurants, his import businesses, his real estate holdings with perfect legality. The Vitoli Foundation for Vulnerable Children had distributed $4 million in the past year alone. College scholarships. Medical care. Safe housing for abandoned infants. His men had stopped asking questions about the transformation. When a man as powerful as Nico Vitali chooses redemption, the rest of the world adjusts. On his desk sat a single framed photograph. Cassandra and Micah, taken 3 months earlier in the garden of her new apartment, a place she had chosen herself, decorated with her own hands, free of debt and obligation. In the photo, she was laughing at something the boy had said, her face tilted toward the light. Nico kept this photograph where he could see it while he worked, and sometimes, when the weight of his past pressed down on his shoulders, he would look at it and remember that redemption was not a myth invented by priests. The car carrying Cassandra and Micah arrived at his building at 5:23 in the evening. The doorman greeted them by name. The elevator rose silently to the 34th floor. And when the doors opened, Nico was waiting. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, but his tie was loosened and his shirt collar was open in a way that suggested he had been waiting, anticipating this moment. His hair, dark with threads of silver at the temples, was slightly disheveled. When Micah saw him, the boy broke free from Cassandra's hand and ran forward, his small body colliding with his father's legs. Nico knelt down, and Carlo, standing discreetly by the elevator, turned away to give them privacy. "How was school?" Nico asked, his voice no longer the instrument of violence it had once been. "Vivi taught us about the moon," Micah said, "and how it pulls the ocean." "Is that magic?" "Yes," Nico said. "That is exactly what it is." Later, after dinner, prepared by a chef but served by Nico's own hands, a ritual he had developed over the months, Micah sat between them on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights. The boy held a picture book in his lap, its pages worn soft from repeated readings. His head rested against Cassandra's shoulder, and his small hand reached across to touch his father's arm. "Read the story about the lost prince," Micah said. Nico opened the book. His voice, when he began to read, was gentle in a way that would have seemed impossible to anyone who had known him a year before. He had learned this skill by watching Cassandra, by sitting beside her as she read to Micah night after night, learning not just the words but the cadence, the pauses, the way love could be transmitted through the simple act of giving a child your full attention. As he read, Cassandra watched his face. The scar that ran from his eye to his cheekbone seemed less severe in the evening light. His hands, which had ordered executions and orchestrated empires, turned pages with reverence. When the story ended, Micah was already asleep, his breathing deep and even. Nico carried the boy to his bedroom, a room designed to match his dreams, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and shelves full of books, and laid him gently under the covers. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, simply watching his son sleep, the way a man watches a miracle he still cannot quite believe is real. Cassandra was waiting on the balcony when he returned. The August humidity had broken, the night was cool and clear, and the city spread before them like an infinite sea of light. "Come here," Nico said. She did not move. She was afraid, in a way that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with hope. He walked to her, and without speaking, he took her hand and placed it over his heart. Under her palm, she felt the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady and strong. In the year that had passed, she had learned that Nico Vitali was not a man of grand gestures. He was a man of small, precise movements. Of intentions made real through persistent action. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear it, though there was no one else on the balcony, no one else in the building who would dare interrupt this moment. "I know," she whispered. "You do not know. Not all of it." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. The kind that contains either ruin or salvation, depending on the person holding it. "I have loved you since the night I found you in the ruins of your room, standing in ash and holding only a photograph, refusing to break. I have loved you through every moment since. And I will love you for the rest of my life, if you will let me." He knelt on one knee on the balcony, and somewhere in the building, servants heard the sound and told other servants, who told still others, until by morning the story had spread through the entire household. The boss had knelt. The invincible man had bent his knee. "Cassandra Wells, will you marry me?" She could not speak. Her hands covered her mouth as tears spilled down her face, not tears of sadness, but of a joy so profound it felt like drowning in light. She nodded, again and again, unable to form words. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. Yes. 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 He slipped the ring onto her finger, a diamond so flawless it seemed to contain entire universes within its depths, but it was not the ring itself that mattered. It was the man who had chosen to kneel, to humble himself, to declare that love was stronger than the empire he had built. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday in October, they married in a small chapel in Manhattan. The guest list was small, Carlo and Nino in tailored suits, standing as witnesses. The children from the House of Hope, dressed in new clothes, sitting in the front rows. Micah as the ring bearer, his small face serious with the weight of his responsibility. Cassandra wore a wedding dress of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with her hair woven with white flowers. When she walked down the aisle, Nico watched her as if she were the only real thing in a world made of shadows. The vows they exchanged were their own, not borrowed from tradition. "I promise to see you," Cassandra said, her voice steady now, no longer trembling. "Not as what you have been, but as who you are becoming. I promise to build with you, not in spite of your past, but because I understand that the darkest soil grows the strongest flowers." Nico took her hands in his. "I promise that every day of your life, you will know that you matter. That you are not invisible. That your worth is not measured by what you produce or what you own, but by the infinite value of your presence in this world. I promise to be the man you believe I can be." Meanwhile, in a federal penitentiary in upstate New York, Robert Hargrove sat in a cell measuring 8 feet by 10 feet, serving the first year of a 40-year sentence. The charges had accumulated: attempted extortion, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, wire fraud. His lawyers had appealed and appealed, but the evidence was irrefutable. The recordings were clear. His intentions were documented in his own handwriting. No one came to visit him anymore. Catherine Mercer's fall had been more public and therefore more complete. The arrest footage, captured in high definition as federal agents led her from her Park Avenue penthouse in handcuffs, had been viewed more than 8 million times. The videos of her confessions, made in the belief that privacy would protect her, were now available to anyone with an internet connection. She had tried to disappear into anonymity, but anonymity is a privilege extended only to those who were never famous to begin with. Every restaurant owner in Manhattan knew her face. Every social club had banned her. The bank had frozen her accounts while the civil suits were filed. The Mercer family, ashamed and furious, had removed her from their will and their lives with the finality of death. She had destroyed herself trying to destroy someone she perceived as beneath her. The irony was so perfect it almost seemed like divine justice. But Cassandra did not think of them on her wedding day. She did not spare them a moment of energy or a single thought. Instead, as she danced with Nico in the small reception held in the penthouse afterward, she felt the complete and utter absence of fear. There were no threats waiting in the shadows. No debts that could not be paid. No fires coming to take everything away. The man who held her had the power to protect her, yes, but more importantly, he had chosen to become the kind of man worth protecting. Micah fell asleep against Carlo's shoulder around 9 in the evening, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Nico carried him to bed while Cassandra stood on the balcony, looking out at the city that had tried to crush her and failed. A light snow had begun to fall, which was unusual for October but not impossible. Each flake landed on her upturned face and melted instantly against her warm skin. She thought about the night of the fire, standing in ashes with $200 and a photograph. She thought about the woman she had been then, desperate, terrified, believing that survival meant remaining small and quiet and invisible. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned that family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. When Nico returned, he wrapped a cashmere coat around her shoulders and pulled her close. They stood together in the snow, the city glittering below them like a promise fulfilled. This story teaches us that the invisible people in our lives are not invisible because of their circumstances. They are invisible because we have not taken the time to look. It teaches us that redemption is not reserved for those with power, it is available to anyone willing to choose it. It teaches us that a single act of true kindness can rewrite the entire trajectory of someone's life. How did Cassandra's story make you feel? What would you have done in Nico's position? Have you ever known someone who was treated as invisible, someone who deserved so much more? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation that helps us continue creating stories like this one. If this story touched you, subscribe to this channel. Like this video and share it with the people you love. We wish all of you watching good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.